You inherited a property, and somewhere between figuring out what that means legally, emotionally, and practically, someone probably told you the answer is simple: list it, find an agent, let the process handle it. Maybe you've already started thinking that way yourself. This video is for you if you're in that early stage, less than a few months in, still figuring out where to start and wanting to understand what you're actually dealing with before you commit to anything. Because there's something most inherited property sellers don't find out until they're already in the middle of the process. The traditional sales process wasn't built for your situation, not because there's anything wrong with your property, not because there's anything wrong with you, but because the process itself was designed around a specific type of seller. One who has time, flexibility, and a straightforward path to closing. And inherited property sellers, more often than not, don't fit that profile in the ways that matter. Here's what I mean. When you inherit a property, you didn't choose to be in this situation. The property came to you with its history, its carrying costs, and the responsibility of handling it correctly on behalf of someone who is no longer here. That responsibility is real, and it shapes how you need to approach this differently than someone who simply decided to sell a house. The first thing most inherited property sellers don't account for is time. The traditional process, from deciding to list, to finding an agent, to preparing the property, to days on market, to negotiating an offer, to clearing contingencies, to closing, runs a minimum of 60 to 90 days. And that's when everything goes well. That timeline doesn't account for buyers whose financing falls through. It doesn't account for inspection negotiations that restart the process. It doesn't account for the weeks before listing that go into preparation. Every one of those days costs you something: property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance on a property that isn't generating anything for you. Most sellers don't add up what that carrying cost actually totals across a 4 to 6 month traditional sales process before they start. By the time they do, they're already in it. The second thing that often goes unaccounted for is complexity. Inherited properties aren't always straightforward. Sometimes there are other family members who have a stake in the outcome. Sometimes there are estate considerations still being resolved. Sometimes the history of the property itself introduces variables that a standard agent relationship isn't built to navigate. The third thing is what most people don't say out loud. How this resolution feels matters, not just financially, but in terms of what this situation actually represents. Inherited property sellers aren't just sellers, they're handling something that carried weight for someone they've lost. The right resolution isn't always the fastest one or the most profitable one on paper. Sometimes it's the one that feels like it honors what the property was. A traditional transaction isn't designed to hold that. None of this means you shouldn't talk to an agent. It means you should understand what the process actually involves for someone in your position before you decide which path makes sense. That's what the next few videos are going to walk through. What your actual options are, what each one costs in time and certainty and control, and how to think about which one fits the situation you're actually in. Not the situation a standard sales process assumes you're in, the one you're actually in.